Hey, it's Mike here, and today, the Canada Food Guide. Hot off the press, we're gonna look at what it's recommending, what it's not recommending, and some of the public's initial reactions. Bit of housekeeping. First of all, contrary to popular belief, I am actually not Canadian. I am from the United States. Flattered by the accusation, though. I just didn't want this video to further perpetuate that myth. All right, let's go. All right, so what happens when you give 37 scientists 3 years to come up with a food guide? Well, jumping over to Canada Food Guide's website, this plate. At first glance, I found this plate a little bit shocking. Why? Because 90% of it is exactly what I eat as a whole food vegan. It's like looking in a mirror, but it's like a plate mirror. Well, almost. Here, let me fix it. That is literally what I eat. Or even simpler, for other vegans, you could just say, those are mock meats. There you go. Also, notice that cup? It's not dairy, it's water. I can just imagine the US being like, hey Canada, got milk? You want to do some milk together like old times, get our fix? And then Canada being like, sorry, not anymore. I'm gonna be nice about this because I'm Canadian, but you're addicted, America. Cheese also does not appear anywhere on the plate, and this one Twitter user felt that this was personally attacking them. And while they do have several vegan recipes on their site, which is awesome, they do have a recipe with cheese, which I have to mention is the single main source of saturated fat, at least in the US, so we can presume it's probably the case in Canada as well. So it's sending a bit of a mixed message, but still, this is a massive step ahead. I mean, simply put, from the Globe and Mail, the message is clear: eat more plants and less meat and dairy. And going a step further, the food guide is really openly including a vegan diet. It's not saying that you have to be eating animal products, you have to be eating dairy, and so forth. One message is a little unclear though, quote, limit foods high in sodium, yeah, that makes sense. Sugars, yeah, that makes sense. Or saturated fats. A lot of people aren't that familiar with what actually has saturated fat. And back to this chart, again of the US, but assuming it's a good metric for Canada, dairy as a whole is the main source of saturated fat when you're looking at food groups. Meat is another huge source. No, it doesn't say anywhere in writing to specifically reduce meat and dairy intake, and it's being implied, and other food guides have done that as well, and it's kind of a way to not snub those industries but still try and tell people to eat healthier. I'm also trying to wrap my mind around this mysterious tub of whiteness. I feel like because of its size, one might interpret it as mayo, which is definitely not a good source of protein considering it is generally 99% of calories from fat. Yeah, it's probably just yogurt at a weird scale, and I'm gonna assume that it is cashew yogurt because that's my favorite type of yogurt to eat. And I will also mention they do have eggs on there. Yeah, it isn't a whole egg, but they're still saying eat eggs, and those are, back to the US as a metric for Canada, the main source of cholesterol in the US diet, so there's not really any reason to eat them at all. Again, though, this is a massive accomplishment, and it's probably going to save lives for people that follow it. That's just being honest. All right, moving on, let's take a look at the history of the food guide, because it's pretty entertaining. Here's the 1945 version, which I am pretty impressed to see actually recommends eating a meat substitutes as a choice. However, it also says to eat liver, heart, or kidney once a week. Why? And I love how on the top it says food rules, like you have to eat organs once a week. And you thought veganism was a cult. That sounds like a cult. And moving forward to the 1977 guide, whose 4 food groups just literally died in the last 24 hours, well, following that, you would be led to believe that you have to eat 50% of your diet as meat and dairy. I mean, look at that plate. You know, you eat 50% saturated fat, end up developing heart disease at the age of 5, and then die of a heart attack on the hockey rink. Not anymore. So we have to ask, how did they accomplish this? How did they make it so far? And the simple answer is they let scientists do their job and they left industry mostly, almost entirely out of it. Here is Bill Jeffrey, Executive Director for the Center of Health Sciences and Law, talking on CBC Radio.
You know, when the previous food guide was being developed, they actively invited some industry representatives to be part of advisory groups, and this time they've set up some firewalls. It has become clear that industry is very determined to put its mark on it, and they can't communicate directly with the scientists that are working on the guide, but they can talk to their bosses and their bosses' bosses. There's lots of evidence that they've been communicating with MPs, trying to, get their position
back
reflected.
in.
Yeah.
So that was recorded before the food guides came out, and you can tell the lobbyists did not win the battle. It's also worth mentioning that there was concern within the agricultural arm of the government, sort of the Canadian equivalent of the USDA, that recommending going more plant-based was going to hurt the animal agriculture industry. From this article, quote, secret memos from Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada stated that emphasis on plant-based proteins would have, quote, negative implications for the meat and dairy industry. The AAFC also argued against plant-based diets being more sustainable, claiming that the beef industry was making sustainability efforts. That's like saying solar isn't more sustainable than crude oil because we're trying to make crude oil a little bit more eco. No, I'm sorry, it's not. I have to just quickly mention this study that demonstrated that grass-fed cows emitted 3.5 times as much methane than grain-fed cows, and methane is a very powerful greenhouse gas, not the solution. All right, now I want to talk a little bit about the response. The response in general from the public was very positive, overwhelmingly positive. However, there were some meat and cheese lovers that didn't take it so well. One area in particular that has been criticized for is ignoring the aspect of inequality. From this article on that subject, quote, "The symbolic fruity, nutty, grainy plate is actually out of reach for many who struggle with poverty, food insecurity, and health illiteracy." Well, I understand the concern, and I think it's good to open the conversation here. I have to disagree on a few counts. First of all, isn't it a great step for health literacy to have a easy to understand image of actual food? I think that's a win. Next, should you not be telling somebody what the proper goal to aim for is just because they might have a harder time reaching it? I mean, it's kind of like telling somebody who is obese that because they can't reach the minimum amount of exercise, that they should just not exercise at all. In fact, I think the exercise recommendations should include couch time. No. Hiding the best recommendations isn't gonna help anybody, and furthermore, chronic diseases which are a result of diet affect people who are in poverty more than anybody else. It hurts them way more to miss a day from diabetic complications, for example. So eating a diet more like that plate could prevent people from losing money from missing work. And next, how is swapping the most expensive parts, meat and dairy, for legumes, whole grains, and water an attack on the poor? The previous guide would be more of an attack on people in poverty because those are more expensive, and it already said to eat vegetables, so that would have been worse in every way, but yeah, it was a status quo, so why challenge it? And yes, fresh fruits and vegetables are not the cheapest thing in the world, and that's why Canada should consider subsidizing them like they have subsidized meat and dairy. From this article, quote, "In 2011, the Canadian government gave $7 billion in subsidies to agriculture, mostly for meat and dairy." Do you know how many heads of broccoli that is? In conclusion, this is a major win, and I hope more governments follow Canada's lead. If anything, this is a demonstration that when you keep industry out of, well, anything, good things happen. So stay hydrated, eat more plants, and even be aware of food marketing. Wow, these guys are good. Also want to give a special thanks to Jim and the crew at Lighthouse Landing Camp in Ontario for keeping me educated on this issue as it progressed. All right, I want to keep this short, so feel free to let me know what you think about all this down below. Share any funny reactions people have had to this, and feel free to share the video, like, subscribe, hit the notification bell, and I'll see you in the next video. Maybe I should tone this curl down a little bit and, no, it's not going anywhere.